Well, welcome to session two. Well, actually, the second audio video lecture that we've had in this apologetic series. But this is section three of unit one, basic apologetics. And what we're going to look at this time, and I know the notes are there for your well being, but I think sometimes it helps to have uh, some lecturing go along with that. It's just for your benefit. It's here. It's available to whoever wants it. So it's going on my blog site anyway, so I might as well do it, and so it's not a problem. So you don't have to watch these; they're for your benefit only. I think they will help you. Obviously, or I wouldn't be doing them, but you don't have to. If you want to take the little quizzes just for fun, because no one's being graded, and I don't see anything you do in those quizzes, but you won't get all of the information for the quizzes unless you listen to the lecture too. So probably should have mentioned that previously, but there it is. So I'm kind of learning with this new. It's kind of like a new area of doing this for me because I'm kind of doing it in a more interactive way, and I'm using something Facebook Groups has called units in an education module where you can basically set it up like an online course. So that's kind of new to me, but I'm feeling pretty comfortable with it now, but there's still some more things in it we can use. And if I see anything else I can use without making my life any more chaotic, then I'll use it. If not, we'll just leave it alone. But our unit one is basic apologetics. It's just basic apologetics. If you haven't read any of the previous stuff or seen anything, I'd encourage you to go back and look at that. You don't have to, but just so you know, and I probably won't say this again in these series, but it's all here for your benefit. It's here just to put out everything I can give you from things I've studied and things that I've looked at. And if anybody's helped by it, great. If not, then, I guess I blew a lot of hot air out. But hopefully that's not the case. We're going to look at Unit 1, Section 3, the realities of world views. And I'm looking at your notes, the same notes you have. And what we're dealing with in this section is going to sound a little, I guess, scary because it sounds more philosophical, but it is. It's kind of philosophical, primarily in nature, because we're dealing with the isms that other people that reject a Christian worldview get caught up in. So when you meet someone someone who doesn't want anything to do with a Christian worldview or even a religious worldview, they are going to probably be in one of these categories that we're going to talk about, and they're probably going to be somewhat adamant about how they will come across like, they are much more intelligent, they are much more philosophical and intellectual. But we're going to see from these things that it's not the Christians that have to run around being intimidated. It's actually quite the opposite. So I want to go over two terms that we've got to deal with, because everything we're going to talk about today is going to build on these two terms. The first term is logically self-defeating. That might sound scary, but all it just means is that it's an idea of statements whose falsehood is a logical consequence of the act or situation of holding them to be true. So basically, in plain English, is as simple as I can get. It's a statement that when you read the statement, you realize that the only logical conclusion is that the statement contradicts itself, defeats itself, or is just illogical and unusable. Okay. The second thing, and it sounds similar, and this is kind of a word you don't hear a whole lot, but self-referentially absurd. Okay. It just means that it's someone who believes that there are no absolutes. And so they're going to make a claim that is self-referentially absurd. And that claim will say that there's no absolutes. The problem of that is it is an absolute when you say there are no absolutes. So the statement of there is no absolutes, because that's what self-referentially absurd is. It's a statement. It's saying nothing. We don't know. You can't say that anything is completely true. Like there's nothing absolutely true. It's all just relative. It's all just subjective. There's no way we can know that something's true. Well, the problem with that is a absolute statement. You're saying there's nothing that can possibly be true. Well, you've just made an absolute statement. So it's self-defeating, and it contradicts itself to the point that the statement becomes absurd. It is. It's humorous because you listen to it with a rational mind, and you're going to go, you can't even say that because you just said you can't make a statement like that. So that may sound kind of confusing, but don't let that be confusing. Just understand those two definitions. Logically self-defeating is an idea that says there's no, there's no way to make a statement like that without realizing you just defeated the whole statement you made. The self-referentially absurd is just the idea there are no absolutes. They're similar. They're very close in meaning and what they sound like, but both of these things are elements of each of these isms that I'm going to deal with here. And I call them the isms that dominate invalid worldviews. When people have an invalid worldview, it's usually one of these isms. Yes, there could be some other ism out there, but these are your standard things that people are saying. Instead of Christianity, I hold to the much more intellectual ism. Okay, well, let's see how intellectual they actually are. The first one is skepticism. Some people call it subjectivism. And defined, it just means that no statement is true. Okay, and with each of these, I'm going to have a definition, and I'm going to have what I call killer questions. And these are things that when you ask these questions, it kills the statement, kills the ideology, kills the ism, and puts a hole in it that it can't hold water. So if you ask these killer questions, that person's done. From a logical standpoint, from a reasoning standpoint, they're finished. And you're not doing it to be ugly or mean. It's just you're trying to help them see what they're saying and believing and teaching is completely illogical, is irrational, unreasonable, and it's not something to be clung to as a better alternative. It's not an alternative at all. So just understand that. So skepticism is defined that nothing is true. Nothing you say or write or read is true. Okay, the problem with that is, and it's kind of humorous, and I know some of these are, so you just have to try not to get too tickled. But what is the killer question you can ask? Well, you could ask them, say, okay, you're saying that nothing is true. Okay, well, is what you just said, nothing is true? Is that true? Okay, if they say yes, then they're really going to look silly. If they say, well, I don't know, then it's like, well, how can you go and categorically make a universal statement saying that all things are false when you just turned around and made a statement saying every single statement in the universe is false? It's ridiculous. And so obviously that's not going to be that hard to get them to hang their mouth open like, oh boy, I shouldn't have said that. You could also ask this, okay, can you know that nothing is true? Can you know that all things are false? Is it possible for you to know? No. Therefore, the premise of skepticism is both logically self-defeating and self-referentially absurd. Okay? And so if you want to look at what those terms mean again, look back up at the top. But they're saying something that defeats itself. You don't have to do anything to defeat skepticism and subjectivism because it defeats itself. When they start talking and you ask them, well, can you even prove that what you're saying is true? They'll say no. And if they can prove it, then they just prove their statement's wrong. So either way, it's a win-win. You're not going to lose that one. It's pretty humorous, but to me, that one really tickles me quite a bit. But we'll just try to move right along. The second one is epistemological relativism. What does that mean? Well, it just means that all propositions are true. Everything is true. Okay? Well, here's some killer questions to ask. Is the proposition that all things are true, is that true? Well, they're going to say, well, yes, it's true. Okay? Because everything's true to them. But then you ask them, can you know that it's true? How would you know that? How are you sure? they're going to have a hard time explaining that. So they could try to say, I'll just give an example of this. What you can do with them is you can give them obvious propositions, which is a statement that is not true, and prove them wrong. You could say gasoline is not flammable. I like gasoline and fire. That's a good illustration. But it says gasoline is not flammable. And you ask them, is that true? And of course, they're going to say, blah, 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 blah. They're not going to say. If they say true, then I would suggest maybe in a safe way getting some gasoline and showing them what happens when you light it. They'll find very quickly that it is completely true. It is flammable. So the statement that gasoline is not flammable is going to be hard for them to defend that. And if one of them is wrong, then their entire system breaks down because their system says all propositions are true. So if you can prove one wrong, the whole card house falls down. The next one is evidentialism. This one it just means that it is immoral to believe anything without sufficient proof. You should have proof before you believe anything, and you have to have sufficient proof. Well, here's the problem with that, and this is humorous again. Ask them, where is your proof for that statement? Do you have proof for that? Where do you get that from? Where can you pull that from? They probably won't. Then you could ask, say you do have proof, how do I know it's sufficient proof? Who decides? Who decides if it's sufficient proof or not? So I know we're kind of getting into the philosophical realm here, and it's kind of a big spooky word to use the word philosophical, but it's just all I'm giving you is tools to show people that try to act like, oh, they're so intelligent and so smart and you're so stupid for being a Christian. If you just ask basic questions like this, they're going to have a lot of explaining to do, and none of it's going to work, but it's going to be really entertaining. And so you don't have to feel intimidated. The next one, and this is humorous as well, scientific positivism. It says that it is irrational to believe anything that cannot be verified by the scientific method. Okay? Problem. You ask them, okay, what science experiment or what scientific methods did you use to prove this statement to be true? They won't have any, so that statement's not true. Moving right along. Misology. Misology is the reason, and it's a belief that reason and logic are negative concepts, and I must therefore hate them and even display my hatred for them. Okay? You can ask them this: what process brought about your conclusion? How did you decide that reason and logic are negative concepts? They're going to give you reasons, and they're going to try to logically prove to you why that's wrong. And then you can say, but that can't be right because you hate reason and logic. They're negative concepts. You can't use something you hate and say that's negative to prove your point. So that'll be a humorous conversation that won't probably last that long, but it is kind of funny. Then you can also say basically any explanation they give you is going to be reasoning. And so that's what's kind of funny. You're kind of setting them up, and it's humorous. Just be nice and kind with it. But any answer they give you is going to prove them wrong. Just the fact that they're trying to give you an answer proves their premise wrong. All right. Deconstructionism. Deconstructionism says that it is impossible to ever know the meaning of any written text. So you cannot know the meaning of any written text. This is hilarious to me, but it's basically saying no one ever can read anything and know what it means. Well, that's fun. Here's some killer questions. You ask them, can you know the meaning of deconstructionism? Because it's written down. It's a written down philosophy. Can you look at that and know what it means? Just real simple. You're not doing NASA grade earth-shattering scientific questions here. You're just asking them, can you know the meaning of what you're saying? Because if you can, you're disproving what you're saying. You can also say, what proof can you offer? If they can offer proof for it, it's going to come up in the form of writing or something that's been said, and it's going to, again, disapprove it. So just simple examples of this is going to prove it false. And if you really want to have some fun and they just keep getting just really, abrasive about it and just start belittling it. You can say, okay, well, you write down on a piece of paper, getting pinched hurts. Getting pinched hurts. They're going to say, well, I don't understand. I don't know what they're going to say. I have no idea what they would say. I don't know what I'd try to say if I believe that. That would be a scary place to be. But you say, getting pinched hurts. Do you understand that? And then if they don't understand it, you pinch them. And I guarantee you, at some point, they're going to admit they knew what that was. They probably won't let you pinch them. So, or you could. I don't want to give you bad ideas, but you could say, getting your nose broke hurts, and write that on a paper and say, would you like me to demonstrate what's on this paper? They'll say no, because they understand what's written there, which proves the whole point to be wrong. Please don't punch anybody in the nose, though, because I do not want to be held liable for that. But maybe pinching is fine. Punching is a little much. All right. I mean, this is funny. And if you're giggling a little bit, you probably should be. It is funny. This was one of the more entertaining things that I did today was look at this. It was just kind of a good laugh in many ways. But the last one is postmodernism. Postmodernism is just going to take us back up to skepticism or subjectivism. It's similar. It's almost the same thing. But it is defined as just really broad skepticism, just overly skeptical about everything. Everything's subjective. Everything's relative. It doesn't have a meaning. It's not true or false. It's just input. One person writes a book about mumbo jumbo nonsense. It's just as equivalent to somebody who wrote a treatise on a medical finding, because it's all relative. If it's really all relative, then there's no point in them going to the hospital. There's no point in them buying better gas for their car. There's no point putting gas in the car. It's all relative. You could put orange juice in your car and it would run just fine, because, you don't even need a car. You could just get a box and paint circles on it, and it's all relative. So it would take you where you need to go. It's great. But, all I'm trying to show you with these rather humorous examples is that the systems of thought that we looked at, these are worldviews that are faulty in nature. They're faulty. They have no foundation. They're self-defeating. They're absurd. The more they try to defend it, the deeper their hole gets. They dig themselves deeper into the hole. So don't feel intimidated. Don't feel like when someone says, well, I'm a skeptic, or I'm a whatever ism I'm in, that to you ought to give you a lot of confidence, because the Bible is logical. The Bible is reasonable. The Bible makes sense, and it's reality. This is La La Land. Some of this stuff is way so far out in left field that you can't even see home plate. Okay, so in conclusion, when somebody does this, that they're using self-defeating arguments, or they're using something that's just absurd, and the more they try to press it and prove it, the more they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. So we have to deal with this, because we're going to deal with next the correct worldview and why it is correct. And that may take a few sessions, but we'll break it up in small sessions. It's not like we're reviewing for a test or anything. This is just for your educational benefit and maybe entertainment as well. But this is probably one of the most sillier sessions we will have to have, because it deals with some stuff just out there. But you have to deal with stuff that's out there because people are out there, literally, sometimes. And you have to know how they're thinking. We're not doing this to make fun of anyone. We're not doing this to belittle anyone. We're doing this so that when you deal with someone, you're going to know, you got to know how they think. You got to know in what way they think. And the way they think is going to be dictated by their worldview, how they see everything, their perspective. And if you don't at least know the general idea of what they think and how they're thinking, it's going to make it a lot harder for you to get through to them. And it's going to make it harder for you to show them with persuasion and reason that what they're believing in is not a better alternative. It is literally absurd. But you have to show them that in a civilized, logical way, or you're just going to make them upset and you're going to turn them off, and they're going to just get really resentful to any Christian that comes along. And that, of course, is not good. That's enough. We've gone far enough, and we'll try to keep these all about 20 minutes usually. But I added a little more in here today, just trying to explain a few things. But hopefully these are enjoyable to you. And if you don't look at them ever, then I guess you missed out on little bit of fun we had together. Feel free to comment. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to start discussions on the Facebook page, Voice in the Wilderness Bible Study Group. And be sure to check out Voice in the Wilderness, the blog site. It is vitw2018.wordpress.com. Have a wonderful afternoon, and the Lord bless you.